Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to yet another episode of As I Live and Grieve. We're so happy that y'all keep joining us. Oh, look, I said y'all. I did spend about 10 years or so in the South, and every so often I kind of lapse back into that y'all. So at any rate, thank you for joining us again. I can't tell you how important today's episode is to me because I inadvertently actually did this without realizing it as part of my grief journey. We're going to talk about finding purpose in our grief. And our guest today is Caren Paskel. Is it Paskel or Pascal?
Whatever your heart desires, it's fine. Either way, I don't mind. I say Pascal, but you could say Pascal. Either way.
Okay. Well, I guess it depends on whether you want to flourish or not. But Caren is with us today. Welcome, Caren, and thanks for taking a few moments for us.
Well, thank you for being here as well.
Good. And also, of course, my sidekick, Kelly, is here. Hi, Kelly.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us. So it's the three of us today. Caren, could you start us off by just sharing with our listeners a little bit of your background, please?
Well, sure. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to share my story. I say, show up in your glory and share your story. And that is actually how I define my success, is just showing up, being visible, and sharing what I've been through to spread the light and the positivity and activate and inspire others. And it's funny because I was an introvert, very introverted little kid, and yet I had a stage presence. So I was introverted and very creative in the arts, in the field of art. But then I became a yogi, very passionate about yoga in high school because I had some panic attacks and some anxiety, and my mom thought it would be really good for me. That really started my spiritual journey. So it was maybe 15, 16 years old where I was introduced with higher concepts of life and living, a sort of philosophy, values to live by, where I had never, even though I did have a bat mitzvah, I have a Jewish background, that religion in itself, I didn't really understand. It just didn't make sense to me. But yoga seemed more practical in what I was hearing in class. And I had a deeper connection within myself. So that opened me up to explore it, which is what we were talking about, pick something of interest. It interested me. I had an amazing experience, a kind of a transformational epiphany at a very young age. Like, what did I just experience? Why was this so amazing? It wasn't because I was moving my body in these ways. That was nice, but it was because I was looking inward at myself. There were no mirrors in the room. So I saw myself differently. And I made this connection that was like, who is that part of me that I've never sensed before? So with art and yoga, I went on a journey. Fast forward a little bit. I actually went to art school and became sort of an abstract artist, but also integrated yoga into my art. So it was really this beautiful combination. And eventually I, started teaching yoga without any training. I was more so good at directing people inward. So that very first experience that I had, it led me to realize I had this purpose of guiding people to that same place. And it was actually really simple to do. I was astonished. I was surprised. And it was at that moment, I think it was in my maybe 19 years old, where I taught a yoga class with no training, just got up there and started guiding people into movements and talking about life at the same time. And they had a great class and I had a great time. So that led me into teaching when I was still in art school. And that's how I sort of started making money and getting a job and all of these things. I was teaching all around California. And then I ended up moving back home and getting a job with my brother who had opened a yoga studio. So I started working full time in yoga at multiple studios, ended up teaching trainings, manager of teacher development. But the philosophy, how to live life versus just making a living, interested me way more. The mental component and the mindset, the spirituality, that pulled me further into myself and this wanting to know more and figure out how to be happy. Because even though I looked good on the outside, I wasn't happy on the inside. I did not believe in myself. I did not love myself. I had anxiety. I had depression. I was getting in unhealthy relationships. I had different eating issues and disorders, like all a bunch of stuff, then health issues. How can this person who came from a great family and had a great education have all these mental problems?
Right.
And for me, they were really serious. Like,
Sure.
it doesn't matter if you have enough to, like shelter and food. When you are mentally depressed and unhappy, it's like you don't really have a zest to live.
That's
and
correct.
So that was like a confusing to me. Like, why am I this way? And once I started to really get deeper into the philosophy, I started to realize the education, the knowledge of just living life and reaching your potential, how to use your body to be of service, how to use your mind to be grateful and devotional, how to use your intellect to contemplate universal truths of life and to grow yourself, and then also to reach this state of enlightenment. I was like, wow, this was never given to me in any educational, system that I've been in. All these schools, my parents never taught me this information. I didn't get it at Sunday school, and it seems so simple to me. And that was frustrating. I was like, why did it take this long for me to get this knowledge? I had to seek it out. Why isn't this everywhere? Why isn't this accessible? And so then I got really passionate about how can I give this to everybody? It's not just for me. Now I want to share it.
Right.
Personality and my language. And so I went through a marriage. I went through a divorce. I had this great career in yoga and teaching all these classes at all these studios and managing things. And then it all fell through. It literally all fell through. My brother's company just kind of, went into a place where they wanted a franchise, and he was kind of pushed out. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to stay somewhere that doesn't align, or do I want to go on my own? And that was where I had to believe in myself enough to believe I can do this. I can open a yoga studio. I can be a business owner. And at the very same time, that's when I met the biggest power of self-belief, which is the book that I wrote about. The catalyst is my husband, who passed away of brain cancer, which we found out that your husband also passed away of glioblastoma.
The exact same type of brain cancer.
And we didn't even know that, which
Right.
is, to me, always, it's never a coincidence. That's what I'll say. It's never a coincidence. So, he was like the epitome of believing in himself, self-confidence, and he had the attitude of drive and determination. And he just thought, whatever I want to do, I'm going to be able to do it. Nothing's going to get in my way. And I was more like, how do I do this? I don't know what I'm doing. And he just said, it doesn't matter. Like, take the risk. What do you have to lose? All you have to lose is money. People who start their own business, sometimes they lose some money, but that's it. You don't have any kids to worry about. It's just you, and you already have a following, and you already know your product. And he was encouraging me to be the brand. And I needed to hide behind something. So I still was working with my brother. I still had a different name of the studio. I didn't fully believe in myself. And so that's where, him and I became really close, my husband. And, when he got sick, it really was the biggest opportunity of my life, because it pushed me to let go of all my fears, all my insecurities, and become this mega power of self-belief, step up to, handle what was going on with him, be a caregiver, because I had never been that before, and recreate my whole business in a pandemic. I had to close my business down. I had 2 studios, and I decided I'm going to go online. I'm going to create mental trainings, and I'm going to coach people and share this and tell them, at the same time, my husband's sick, like, there's a way to still have purpose and find and be yourself, even when you're dealing with tragedy. And that's why I was able to move through that and still have happiness and some peace. Yes, there was a lot of stress. Yes, there were a lot of challenges. But, when he died, I was already in my power. So the grief was just so different for me than if I wasn't. And I kind of think that might be a good place to just just to pause if you have any questions.
Well, I have questions. I always have questions. But as you're telling your story, one word comes to mind to define you, and that word is unstoppable.
I love that.
Once you realize that there was some intention
Yes.
to what you were going to do, you became unstoppable. Despite being a caregiver and having that burden, which for anyone who has been a caregiver, especially with someone with a terminal illness, words fail me when I try to describe how that feels. You just, without really realizing it, day by day, your personal life, your routine, your everything just changes. It dissolves away, disintegrates moment by moment by moment until every moment of every day revolves around taking care of that person, whether it's getting them to the car, to the lab, inside the building, to the exam room, get through that blood draw or whatever, and reverse it all the way back home. Then, feeding them, maybe cleaning them, maybe helping them go to and from the bathroom, whatever it is, every moment of every day is consumed by caregiving. So to have that and also to be working toward your purpose, to me, defines you as unstoppable.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful word. And that's how I would define my husband. And, it was like a choice where I said, I can be unstoppable. I can be a badass. I can do this. And a lot of positive self-talk, but when he could talk, also helped me with that.
Right.
And how hard he was working on himself. But you are exactly right. One of the reasons, my husband was 12 years younger than me. So he was 24 and I was 36 when we met. And one of the reasons he was so interested in me is because he said, you have your life together. To him, it looked like I had things going on. I had purpose, and that attracted him. He was, instead of a girl, just basically the women that he was with before in their 20s. That's why I say girl, very, very young. And they the women that he had dated did not have a sense of purpose or themselves. So it was all about, him. And he didn't want the relationship to be that way. He wanted independence, so he thought we were this power couple. Here she is, she's opening these own studios, she's doing her own thing. And here I am opening my own real estate business, and we're just independent, but at the same time, we're driving each other. Right.
Right.
So we were unstoppable. And that's when he got diagnosed, it felt like this could be the thing that could stop us. And we were like, no way.
Yeah.
He would not take that. And so I decided my husband is now watching me. I'm now caregiving him, and he's what I do and how I do it and who I become. That's either gonna, help him or hurt him. And so I have to step up into my full power and potential now versus and I did. And he got to watch me, and it was not easy, but I will tell you, as you mentioned, because I had a life and I had a purpose and I had intention, it made me hungrier, even with the caregiving and everything being like having to reevaluate our entire lives, right? It was like, we're going to adapt, and we're going to also make this part of our purpose. Like, now we're going to use this. It's not like we didn't see it. He never for once saw being diagnosed with brain cancer, even the terminal diagnosis, as a deficit ever. And so he made a video, and I just watched this. This was 2 months before he died. And I found it looking for something, and I posted it in my caregiving group. It's remarkable. He hardly can speak, but it's not very well, but he gets the message out, and the message said it clearly. He said, brain cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I now am more appreciative of everybody in my life. And I never had that before. I never woke up to that feeling before. And appreciation and appreciating who's in your life. And he included life and his family and his friends. He was so young, so it was like a gift to him. him. That was what
Right.
he needed to wake up to his purpose.
Right.
And it woke me up. His illness woke me up to my purpose and what I
Right.
actually give and contribute. My whole life of like teaching yoga classes physically turned into this whole other life of this mental component. Yes, the physical component is so good to move your body. We need that. And sometimes that gets us into all the other forms of spirituality, right? It's sort of like you wake up to more when you wake up your body. But I was more interested in mental and mindset, mental health and positive mindset.
Right. Right.
Without that, it doesn't matter how much you physically work out. If your mind is a mess, so is the inner workings of your body.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to have your mind with you and on track, especially if you're going to fulfill your intention.
Yeah.
And you talked about kind of a drive, an inner drive that you acquired in the midst of your caregiving. And my perspective on that, because I felt that too, although mine didn't go to my personal purpose or drive, because I was retired from my job and working part-time. But I think I felt a drive as well. But for me, my drive was organizing and advocating for Tom in his illness and making sure that if the doctors did a test, that I followed up on that and that I read the test results, that I read the report, that I understood them. And every time he would go for another MRI or CT scan, of course, they would measure the tumor and they would give the dimensions. Well, when you went back to the doctor, they said everything looked good. But if you read the report, and I was good in math, so I could certainly calculate the volume of that tumor. And I knew that that tumor was again growing. So I knew that not everything was fine. I didn't share that with Tom, but that drive was what kept me on track.
Yeah.
And kept me advocating for him. And part of me thought about that afterward. And I thought that drive, I think, was also my way of showing Tom that I'd be okay, that I understood that he was going to die. I accepted that fact that he was going to die, but I wanted to assure him that I would be okay, that I would be able to go on after he was gone. And I didn't want him to worry about me in that vein. And I think that might be the same for you. It was your way of showing your husband that you were committed to this intention and you were going to fulfill it. And he didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, there was so much to that because I wanted to show him that I was going to be okay. But I also, he didn't want me taking care of him. So it was, I had to sort of, for him, continue to focus on myself.
Right.
Because he was not happy about me helping him. He didn't want anyone to help him. So thank goodness I had my brother-in-law living with us and we had a lot of help with him being there and then also being in a pandemic. So friends and family were over all the time. But David really was almost pushing me all the time. Like if I was moping around, he would say things like, you need to do something, and then I would be like, oh, you're right. And then I would inspirationally do something amazing. And he'd be like watching that and see it. And so he always knew how to light that fire.
Right.
And it really was a huge part of our relationship. And then the most amazing part was when I lit the fire for him. So he was, always working on something with brain cancer. And he was always trying to, whether it's physical therapy or speech therapy, or now I'm going to get a trainer and I'm going to run this 5K, whatever it takes. And, there was a point where he really lost hope. There was just one point. I write about it in my book and I'd never seen him like this, where I think we got some not so great news and he just was losing functionality, all prized possessions, his memory. He had a photographic memory. He was brilliant. He was one of those people where he didn't need to ever study his, all of his tests, his IQ, his AC off the charts. The guy never opened a book. And I mean, he was an avid reader on his own and he just consumed and he'd remember everything. He couldn't remember things. He couldn't text. He couldn't, he wasn't able to speak well than his right side of his body. And then just all of it, right? And even reading, he couldn't read. And he felt like he was losing who he was. And I kept saying, you are more than all of these things. And he had a really hard time understanding that. I said, you are not your body. You are not the things that you can do. And you will realize this at some point. You will understand And maybe this is why these things are happening, for you to realize how much more you are than all of these things that you're good at. And he was face down in the bed, just like kind of like a little kid, just like, he just kept saying, I can't do anything. I can't.
Right.
And I said, yes, you can, because he had a book that was, all the contents were there. It just wasn't written yet. And the title was there. It was called Can't Doesn't Exist. And here he is saying, I can't do this.
I can't.
And I said, yes, you can. I said, you have a book. He's like, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. I said, you have a book and all you need is someone to write it for you.
Yeah.
And I planted that seed. I'm like, you're going to be fine. Don't give up. And I had to be stern. I had that power of self-belief. And because if I coddled him, that wasn't going to help him. I had to give him that push. I said, you are still alive. You are still here and you still have a purpose, bringing it back to that purpose. And for him, that was what he needed to hear. He reached out to his friend who was also, he had published his own self-published his own book. And he reached out to him to ask him about, hey, do you know anyone who could help me with this? And it was also his personal trainer. And he said, I would love to help you. I would love to write this book and publish it for you. I can come and interview you and do some interview style since you can't write. And then I'll write the book and I can co-author it with you.
Right.
So he had purpose at the very end of life before he was in hospice, when he was still semi-functional. That was his drive to get, and he was excited to wake up, even though he'd fall down the stairs.
Yeah.
Even though there were all these complications and he could have a seizure, he was still like, well, I'm going to do my best today. I'm going to have this.
That's right.
And we had such an incredible experience, and he was able to get that book published and get it and see that happened.
Right, right. So how do you help someone who is grieving? And we talk about finding purpose. Well, where do you start? How do you find your purpose?
That's a really good question. And I help my clients. That's, I just want to say to any viewers, I don't help I could possibly, but my clientele is a range from 30 to 70, sometimes even 80. And so mostly 40s to 60s, people are finding, whether they have lost a loved one or not. I work with people who've lost a loved one and they're looking for purpose, but I work with people who haven't lost loved ones and they don't know their purpose and they're 50 and 60 years old. So I just want to define, and this might help some people realize that if you are doing a job and you have a career, that doesn't necessarily mean it's your purpose. If you are not feeling fulfilled on a daily basis. And so there's a lot of clients that come to me who are really successful. They're really good at what they do and they make a lot of money and they even have families, they have nice houses and they travel, and they're coming to me because something's missing, that piece of fulfillment, that piece of meaning in your life. When you wake up, I believe the normal is exceptional and extraordinary. Waking up and being excited to move into your day because you know what you're doing is meaningful to you and other people. And so that's really what it is. It's taking the time. I learned this probably in my late 20s. It's a Sanskrit word. It means swadharma. Swadharma means in line with your nature. So picking something that's in line with your nature. So step one is to figure out, what are your innate inclinations, tendencies, interests, passions, but over a consistent period of time. So what I do with my clients is I have them talk to their parents, talk to people who've known them for a really long time. If they cannot themselves, figure that out, it's like clues. And for me, example would be, I've always been interested in creating art and painting and being creative. I've always been interested in the spiritual and more introverted and philosophy and self-development, right? So this has been consistent for a very long time. When you figure that out, what you're naturally good at, what you're naturally drawn to, and it doesn't matter what it is, that's going to bring more meaning and fulfillment in your life. So it could be a hobby. It doesn't have to be a full-time career. But what I found is most people who find that end end up being able to make a living in that field, even if it's very different field that they're in. So the purpose is within you. And again, nobody ever teaches us this. So it's not your fault. And if you have a chance, I asked somebody, a contractor who came over to my house the other day, he was doing work on my house, and he found out that I was a spirit guide and a mentor. So he's opening up to me, and, he's in his 60s and telling me that he has stress and unhappiness, and he doesn't really know why. So I gave him a few books. I gave him a little bit of help, but I asked this man, I said, what do you do for yourself, just for you, on a daily basis? And he couldn't think of anything.
Right.
It wasn't anything that he did. So he wasn't taking any time to look within. And so whatever it is, if it's meditation, if it's a yoga class, if it's reading, I told him, I gave him these books. I said 10 to 20 minutes. That's all I'm asking for you to give to yourself, to be with you and start discovering who you are, because his whole life, everything's been about everyone else.
Right. I'm going to echo that and add to it. For me, finding my purpose, I didn't realize that it was happening to me, but it really was. I have volunteered a lot. And in this part of my life, I was volunteering in the hospice field, not hands-on caregiving to patients, but in the administrative capacity. So I was doing a lot of work there. I was on a board of directors here and there, but it was in the hospice field. So in my grief after Tom died, I came to the realization that, boy, I did not want to stay in this pit of grief for the rest of my life. I did not want to feel every day that it was an effort to get myself showered and dressed or get up off the couch and even feed myself. I didn't want to go through that. So I needed to do something about my life. I needed to get my life back. I needed to redefine it. One of the phrases as I volunteered, because with volunteering, of course, you can get burned out very quickly and not realize it. So periodically, as I was volunteering for anyone, and this has been through my entire life pretty much, I would ask myself the question, do I feel like I am giving more than I'm getting? Was I still getting that reward, that sense of being valued and everything, being needed? Or was I just giving of myself, giving, and not receiving anything? And if I got to that point, I would re-examine my volunteer work. Is this still what I want to do? Does this still fulfill me? And it was that same question that made me realize that what is it I want to do? What do I feel is my calling, so to speak? What's my purpose? And, I did talk to a lot of people, and they said, well, Kathy, you're facilitating classes. Seems to me you're a teacher. You're intelligent. You know a lot. Seems to me you're a teacher. One thing led to another. The podcast was created, and that's a story in and of itself that I think I've told before online. But the podcast was created, but I realized after about a dozen episodes that I wasn't teaching, and it wasn't, in fact, teaching that I enjoyed. It was the learning. So by having guests every week and hearing their stories and hearing their experience and hearing their modalities or what helped them, I was learning. That's my purpose. So my purpose is sharing that learning with everyone else. It happened without me realizing it. And I think it can for everyone else as well. But first, you need to start with something. What is it, like you say, that interests you? It might be something you've never done. It might be something you never experienced. Well, guess what? When I was a kid, I used to have to go to the library, walk in, go to the reference room, go to the card catalog, and look up and find resources. We don't have to do that anymore. You've got this great internet at your fingertips with all kinds of resources. If you have a curiosity about something that you know nothing about, like podcasting, we started out not knowing anything, but here we are,
right,
4 years later, okay, because we did the research. So that's what I want to encourage our listeners to do. Think of something this year in 2025 that interests you. Research it and see where it might take you. If all you do is research it and move on, perfectly okay. Nothing lost,
Love that.
to move on to something else. Just pick one thing and research it. That's it.
Absolutely. And just to encourage the playfulness and the curiosity, I always, suggest with anybody I'm working with and in my communities is that sense of playfulness and curiosity that we had as children, where we were fantasizing and we were imagining in a healthy way that always kept us busy in a healthy way. We were never bored. We could be by ourselves and we just explore the imagination information in the room, and all of a sudden it was a different reality. And
Right.
so to be open to that, to allowing those inner children, your whole past, to come forward again and express themselves, so
Right.
you can be a happy whole person. So I love the openness, the open-mindedness is something where if you really want to find purpose, be open to your purpose, and it will come to you, or you'll be like, wow, but I will say that for a lot of people, and myself as well, my purpose was enhanced. And also, there was so much more to it when there was this seeming tragedy. So when I always look at challenges, I look at them as opportunities, because it's
Right.
said, we're here as humans to grow, always be given what we need to grow. So whatever is on my plate, I accept it instead of trying to push it away or say,
Right.
why did this happen to me? Because I used to be the victim, really had that victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? And I would feel really bad for myself. And then I learned through the power of self-belief and through my husband not to be the complainer, because that was so draining. That's what sick. That's where I had all these health issues. I was constantly complaining and draining my whole self and all my energy.
Right. Right.
On the problems. And I wasn't focused on what I truly believed I was worthy of.
Right.
Once that, shifted. So
Right.
just to be open to perhaps the things, the traumas in our life, to re-examine some of that. Because if we have had trauma and we're still here, then we did get through it. We may not be totally healed, but we're alive. And that says a lot.
Yeah.
So you can give and you can find purpose from even your traumas, your challenges. And it's also just a sense of like giving back. But what you said, when you're really giving from a place of intention and purpose, you also know how to balance that and how to give to yourself. And that's the whole purpose of my caregiving program and my nonprofit is self-caregiving, which means in order to be a wonderful caregiver to another person, you've got to believe that you can be a wonderful caregiver to yourself. It might not look the way like Kathy was talking about, where before you were caregiving, it's not that way. You might have had an hour to do something and now you have 5 minutes. Well, if it's the highest quality 5 minutes of meditation, is none. That's going to go a hell of a long way for yourself and your sanity to give to this human being. And I know David did not want to see me disheveled, and I was at certain points, but I did my very best to honor what I needed and to give to myself and is the best way I could. And then he would see me in a light, loving way, because I could be that.
Right. Well, sad to say, our time has just flown by. It always does. But nonetheless, this is the time in our podcast session when I actually turn the microphone over to our guest and let our guest speak directly to the listeners. So, Caren, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would just love to say that I have some things going on if anybody's interested. I'm always serving communities. So you can find me on my website with all my information, CarenPaskel.com, Caren with a C. And you can reach out to me. There's multiple ways I'm accessible. So if you reach out within 24 hours, I will respond to you. And I have if you're a caregiver or you've lost somebody, nonprofit started a caregiving program to empower caregivers with self-care practices. And I'm sending my book to caregivers with a signed copy and everything. And I go to the post office every week and I ship some books off. So this is very fulfilling to me to give this book, The Power of Self-Belief. It truly is the gift that keeps on giving, and it carries my husband's legacy as well. So if you're interested, I will give all the links to Kathy. It's the caregiving, it's self-caregiving for caregivers. That's the Facebook group that I support you. There's a channel where we can share there, and I post inspirational posts as well. And if you're just interested in purpose and transformation, I also have another Facebook group. It's called the Community for Self-Transformation. I'm going to be hosting monthly meditations and study groups and Q&As. There's also a private chat line where we share our wins and our gratitude. And just one more program I'd love to share that I'm starting the new year. It's an intimate group. It's on an app called Marco Polo, so that you will see see me sharing these video posts, very short, inspirational messages every day. It's called Deep Thoughts and Revelations. It's a whole year program. So you can listen at your own time and convenience. I'll be sharing a deeper thought and revelation 5 days a week. And I'll also be proposing little fun challenges, maybe gratitude, maybe a meditation, and some reflection and engagement on your end. So you can listen, you can engage, you can share the answer to one of my questions. But it's a very high accountability platform of people who are interested in growth and transformation. So if you're interested, just let me know and I'll give you the information.
Wow, amazing resources. So I hope our listeners are intrigued, curious, and excited about that. As Caren said, her contact information will be in our podcast notes. If for some reason you can't get to that or you don't know how, just send me an email and I will put you in touch with Caren. That new group starting up sounds really interesting, I must say. It really does.
I'll tell you more about it too, because I'd love to have you there. Yeah, I call it DTR, Deep Thought Relations. Yes.
Okay, sounds great. We'll be talking about that one. Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to say I think I have a lot of questions I need to ask as far as what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, what I should.
Interesting.
Well,
I thank you for that.
Thinking about that. I love that. That makes me happy because I always, we can't push information in. We're here to make people think, right? I am, for your own deeper reflection. So I'm glad to have met both of you.
Super. Well, listeners, it's that time. We need to wrap up. So I'm just, again, so grateful that y'all have joined us today. You make my day. I just, I don't know who you are necessarily individually, but I know you're there. I know you're listening. And it is from you that I learn and that I grow, heal, and definitely feel supported. I appreciate that. We talked about a lot of different aspects of finding purpose amidst our grief. I do want to point out a couple of things. The first is that there are innumerable resources available. You have only to look for them. One of my best friends is Google, and I have a new best friend, ChatGPT. That's a whole nother conversation. Email me if you want to hear my funny story about how I met ChatGPT. It's hilarious. Has nothing to do with grief. Has everything to do with a long car ride. At any rate, we want you to take care of yourselves too. Get rid of that negativity because negativity is going to sap your inner healing power. We all have that power within ourselves to help ourselves heal. But if you focus on the negative, you are defeating the purpose. You are taking away, you're robbing yourself of your healing powers. So try to be a little positive. Not easy. Maybe that's a whole nother thing we can look at. Or hey, find some resources, eh? Catch us again next week. Take care of yourselves as we all continue to live and grieve. Thanks again, Caren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asilivengrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.